morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome all of you from different countries, different time zones. I'm really pleased to see you all here, and we continue our live sessions about digital transformation, and today's subject is about energy. I am Lela Machaidze. I am professional project manager. I'm in this field for more than 70 years and have clients from all over the world. I'm passionate about project management and anything related to it. If you want to hear more about me, you can visit my social media sites, my YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and hear the tips and tricks about project management, leadership, and anything that can be beneficial to you. Couple words about today's session. The session will take two parts. First part will be the session for 45 minutes with JeanPaul, and the session will be followed by 15-minute Q&A session. So feel free to post your questions on the chat box. We will address them later. The recording of this video will be posted on the YouTube channel, so you and your colleagues can watch it later. And now this is my real honor, and this is my great pleasure to present JeanPaul Sacy, who is the Regional Director of Middle East Baker and Hughes C3 joint venture of Baker Hughes and AI Silicon Valley-based company. He has been instrumental in several different transformations, strategic development, operational management, and I have real honor and pleasure to have this discussion about the digital transformation in energy with him. Hello, JeanPaul.
Hi, Lela. It's a pleasure to be with you guys today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to have an opportunity to discuss this subject with such a great thought leader. To ice break and start our discussion about the energy, let's just start with the general question, like what digital transformation, what digitization mean in energy sector?
Wow. Well, let's start with some basics. We've all heard about digitalization. It's something that's been on for a few years now. The fact of the matter is most of the businesses we operate in have been progressively digitalizing for the last probably a few decades, 40 years ago. Things have accelerated, I think, for the last, especially the last 5 years, for multiple reasons. There's all kind of different technologies that are coming to maturity more or less at the same time, and that have come to a point that they're actively transforming different businesses. And we've all witnessed this. Airlines are not the same anymore. Shopping is not the same. The internet is changing how we do things. We're going to be talking a lot about the different underlying technologies, AI, blockchain. It's actively transforming one sector after the other. In energy, and I define energy by, obviously oil and gas, but also electricity, renewable, increasingly renewable. The impact of digitalization has been tremendous. We're going to be talking about it in details over the next 45 minutes, but it has actively changed the landscape. And from my perspective, we're only seeing the start. We're only seeing the start because first of all, the energy sector as a whole is, from my perspective, really what's enabling civilization to move forward. There's one constant thing: the more we progress, the more we consume energy, and we are definitely going to progress. So we're going to definitely consume more energy. And as I'm sure you guys have all seen and heard, there's a definite problem with global warming. So we absolutely need to also change the way we consume energy, we consume energy. And from a humble perspective, digital is one of those levers that is hopefully going to enable us to accelerate the energy transition we've embarked on. And for the sake of our children, we absolutely need to succeed fairly rapidly. There's all kind of objectives that have been set, and that again I'm happy to talk about in more details. But the fact of the matter is, digital is a key enabler for that energy transformation. Back to you, Lela.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the digitalization has touched not only one sector, but it is a chain, connected one, like producing light, then refining, then utilities and supplies and channels back to the consumers. So this is whole chain. So this is amazing how it is developing. For company, when it starts thinking about the digitization, how and where it should start thinking about?
Well, first, let's set the basics. When we talk about digitization, what are the components? At least, again, from my perspective, the first thing, especially over the last 5 years, that needs to be put forward first is data. What is really enabling this transformation is the amount of data that we've been able to capture, that we're increasingly processing to make our processes, whatever they are, smarter. What do we mean by smarter? Well, ultimately more effective and efficient. The second pillar is analytics. It's that ability to process that huge amount of data at different levels. We'll talk about sensors in a second. It can be on the edge. Computing power is put really at the end, within the industrial processes, or done on-prem in servers that are located within a company, or even on the cloud. Actually, on the cloud is more often the cheaper and much more economical way. The ability to process those huge amounts of data, often in real time, is fairly new. It's been on for a few years, not 2 decades. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg in the ability for basically data connected with analytics to change, to impact actively some core processes that are really raising energy. The last pillar, so again, data analytics, is connectivity. We're able to connect, often in real time, different processes with sensors. I was reading that there's close to 30 billion sensors that are deployed globally. 30 billion sensors. That's almost 6 to 7 sensors per human being that is actually deployed currently in the world, capturing data on real time. Let me just mention that number again, because it's crazy. 30 billion sensors are out there capturing data. We're doubling every year the amount of data we've been collecting, since the beginning of humanity, every year. So in 2020, 2021, we've doubled the amount of data that we've captured in 1 year, vis-a-vis the last 2,000 years. So that kind of like showcase the magnitude of what's happening. As a recap, again, fundamentally, data is at the core, and then you've got analytics, the ability to process the data, and connectivity. Those are the 3 pillars that really define digitalization and energy.
Amazing. Actually, before the organization, usually when I think about the digital transformation in any company or organization, digitization usually starts, I think, from the mindset of the management and the top and leadership. The willpower and their vision, how digitalization will affect the core, the OPEX, and how it will be efficiency will be seen on this. You mentioned that it should be effective and efficient, but the data which you already mentioned, doesn't it give you a more flexibility and the power of decision making instantly, quicker?
Oh, we'll talk about the impact it has on business models. There's, especially in the energy sectors, there's new business models that are emerging pretty much every day. Not all of them succeed, but definitely those business models are enabled by digital. Now, coming back to the questions you've asked, the transformation we've witnessed is at the same time facilitating the job of the management teams and making it more complex, because fundamentally it's providing more insights. Mm-hmm. But lots of quantities of additional insights. So, from my humble perspective, there's pretty much no excuses anymore not to know. Now, it's not because you know that you're still going to make the right decision, which is ultimately, the role of a managerial team to drive an organization, to drive a team moving forward, to create value for the shareholder, the stakeholders. But the excuse, I didn't know, I didn't have the information, and I had the insights, is less and less valid because the digital transformation with all its different pillars is making that chaotic, huge amount of information, ordered and is enabling in a fairly orderly way to provide insights on multiple underlying use cases and topics from production, maintenance, supply chain, distribution, transmission. We'll go through that level of details later on, but that's really what is to come back to your question, what is enabling that transformation.
Mm-hmm. And what are the main challenges you see as of today, and what challenges you envision in the future? So it's like two pillars. Right now, we have very nice speed picked up after the COVID especially, but what do you think about the future in 3-5 years? 5 years is a lot, changes are expected in 5 years.
So let me unpack your question. What are the key challenges? First, I'll start with some generic aspects that I often see. It is a transformation. Now, it's not yet another project. When we talk about transformation, let's go back to the meaning of the word. It means transforming. It means letting go a few things, acquiring a few new things, and changing the shape of whatever organization is being impacted by that. It's change. So it's not easy. It's essentially people driven. There's all kind of emotions that are involved, and it needs to be managed properly. And that's, from my perspective, the pillar. Let's not forget, we can talk about digitalization. We're all excited with fancy modern tools, but those are tools that are serving people, and people are really at the center of all of this. So if we're missing that aspect, which I tend to see with lots of my clients from time to time, we're missing the big picture, and it's doomed to, if not fail, impact the organization much slower than what it can. The second pillar, the second aspect I'm going to put forward is you can pretty much, sorry for that, transform the vast majority of the underlying processes of a core industrial company, whatever it is. Because there's data pretty much everywhere, and with that data, you can really generate insights and improve. The difficult question is where to start and how to start, and it is a complex question. There is no simple answer to that. My humble suggestion to whomever is listening is to link this to a fairly simple approach and decision-making matrix. We need to look at value. At the end of the day, a corporation has a mandate from its shareholder to create value, economic value. So prioritize first where you see most of the value. Number two is it is a maturity journey. So don't pick up the most complex use case first. Deal with something that you think you're going to be able to succeed with, and then use this momentum that you created by addressing that use case to tackle something a bit more difficult. So it's not only you prioritize by value, you take into account value, complexity, and then the aspect I touched upon, which is maturity. We'll talk about that more specifically later on, but the advice I would give to the different corporations, the advice I give to the different corporations I'm speaking with is don't outsource. Just don't. A lot of the those are your core processes that are being impacted. You might need help in acquiring, installing the right application, but acquire also at the same time those skills, build that skill set within your own teams, and do that progressively. Equip some of your legacy employers with that. Young engineers. I'm a civil engineer. I've never really actually studied anything in digital. Foundations of buildings. This is what, so I've acquired those skills. It is acquirable. So give that chance to your own people. Help them. There's all kind of resources that are available We'll talk about that later on. Courses on computer science, the CS50 Harvard is, yeah, let's take a parenthesis on that. CS50 is a course I've discovered a year ago. It is actually one of the most reputed computer science courses. It is totally free. 3.5 million people took it to date. It's amazing. 12 weeks, a few hours per week.
Good advice for those who are listening. So to catch that moment, good advice.
There's all kind of things. You can Google it. You don't need myself to just Google it. And it's I've taken the course partially at least, and so it's fairly easy nowadays to equip yourself with all basic skills. So give that chance to your employee, help them in that journey, and put them at the center of that transformation, and insource some of those core transformational dimensions. That's it.
Actually, my colleague George has just posted this one of the courses here. So anybody attending, you can take a look at the course. So amazing. You mentioned that the create value is not the only thing that we should be concentrating on. And of course, creating legacy in the company is very important. And actually, this is the response to creating sustainability and looking after the risks that can be reduced. If you have sources inside and you care about the capacity inside the organization, amazing. Actually, for the future, what do you think in the future? The recent priorities for example, 12 months, what those priorities can be for digitizing. Actually, in energy, the word digitizing is more used, and I also switch sometimes to using this word. What are those upcoming short, just after the pandemics, transformation priorities, you think?
So a few things there, Lela. First, the pandemic. I mean, it's been going on for close to 2 years now, a year and a half.
And it has changed a lot, things.
And so there's all kind of literature around that, and it's commonly admitted that over the last year and a half, and you can see it in the share price of some of the leading digital companies, we've basically progressed in 1 year, the equivalent of 5 to 10 years of digitalizations across all verticals globally. Why? Well, we all know why. It's pretty intuitive. We just suddenly couldn't go to work, and Zoom. We started Zooming to do pretty much everything. And companies had we're seeing this coming, obviously, but nevertheless were caught by surprise because they had to just implement this under constraints. So coming back to your questions, what do I see in the next 12 months? Well, if we're a bit optimistic and we see, a pandemic, without additional variants, that is, progressively being managed with vaccine being deployed in more and more countries. So, a progressive return to normality over the next 6 months to 1 year. Again, optimistic, but let's assume this is the working assumption. One thing that I see as a priority is digest all those digital tools, technologies that have been deployed just to keep the boat floating, because it's a lot of change. Things will go back to normal to a certain extent. There's not going to really be a going back to how it was before, because things have changed a lot. But people will need a bit of time to absorb all of that. Working again, probably in a more face-to-face manner, hopefully again. So again, it's absorbing that is going to be required, because it does take time. We're humans, we're not machines. That violent change needs to be digested. But at the same time, the competition, again, we can talk about utilities more specifically, but in utilities, competition is coming left, center, and right. Renewables, there's one thing I'm going to put forward, and you're going to understand the connection with, and it's a fairly recent report from 2017, so it's like 4 years old, but it's still relevant, from the IEA. They believe that digitalization in the energy sector, it's the International Energy Agency, will ultimately impact up to 15% energy use 30% increase in asset availability. And this is the part I love most. And 90% reduction in unplanned asset failure. 90%. That means that that thing is virtually going to disappear. Now, at that time in 2017, their projections were 10 to 20 years. With what has happened now and the acceleration we've mentioned, this is kind of like happening as we speak. Now, we're probably not there for all corporations, but again, 15% energy use, 30% increase in asset availability, 90% unplanned asset failure. That's really changing the game. So why am I putting this forward? Because corporations that don't incorporate this and in their operations, ultimately will be left behind. And it is a very competitive landscape, as we all know. Huh? So that's it. So the workforce also will need to be equipped to digest, and at the same time accelerate, which is paradoxical to a certain extent, but unfortunately that's the nature of competition.
And as you mentioned, actually, the question now is not if the digitization will affect the energy companies, but now the question is that what decisions and steps will be made, how they will be prioritized, and this will probably decide how effective all this digitization process will go. And those companies who will adapt quickly will be the ones who will survive and will the competition, right? And yeah, and to switch to and dive into the more details, like going into more of the infrastructure. What do you think? What are right now the digital platforms more used in energy sectors, and which ones you believe will be more? And how you look at the digital platforms right now used by the energy sector?
So the way I would break it is the following. First, let's go to basics. In any tech, in the technology word, that's a word that I've discovered a few years ago. I had no idea what it was before. We talk about tech stack. So you have layers, and technology is built by layers. And the classic tech stack we put forward is you really start with infrastructure, then platform, then applications, which is common sense. And nowadays, even infrastructure with the cloud can be used as a service. Platform can be used as a service, and applications, obviously. We refer to this as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So the framework we need to keep in mind is this one. And let's start with the underlying layer, infrastructure. There's fundamentally two ways to go about it. Either you continue doing this on premise, which is, we're using the traditional way it's been done for the last, 40, 50 years, servers that you own that are installed within your own premises, or vis-a-vis on cloud. Now, on cloud, it can be in one of the leading providers, being Microsoft, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Alibaba to a certain extent, 60% of the market, or local cloud providers. There's all kinds of applications. We'll talk about it later on around data sovereignty and but fundamentally, that's the infrastructure layer. The economics are much more favorable on the cloud by crazy factors. I mean, we're talking about 10 times less expensive. There's virtually no capex, and it's pay as you go. So think about the beauty of that model. That's why the growth is just unbelievable in the IaaS with those cloud providers, because it just doesn't make economical sense anymore, unless for very specific applications and usage to have servers within your on premises. Now, if we go up one layer, you refer to platforms. Platforms are in between that infrastructure and applications. What is a platform? And I'm definitely not an expert. I haven't studied computer science, but the way I understand platforms is it's a set of it's a solution that enables you to code applications. That's what it is, and to host applications. Let's keep it at this very simple level. Now, platform is where a lot of players, technology players, want to be. Why? Because let's correlate this for the people that are listening to us that are not really familiar with the technicalities to how we were using PCs 5 to 10 years ago. A platform the infrastructure is the computer. The platform would be the Windows 95 is the last one I've installed, but and the applications are things like Excel and Word. Now, lots of people lots of technology firms want to operate at the platform level. Often they are at the application level. Now, you don't really need a platform to be able to operate applications. We'll talk about those specifically later on. So my advice is, first, identify, and I come back to what I was mentioning earlier. Once you've prioritized the different use cases, we refer to use cases in the digital world. Use cases you want to digitalize based on the metrics we talked about, value, complexity. Identify the applications that exist that you can deploy. It's super competitive. SaaS is a super competitive landscape. You got to identify lots of applications. So how you select those applications is a topic in itself. Start with that. And then when you've successfully deployed 1 to 2 applications and you've taken into account interoperability and other parameters, I'm adding complexity progressively, and you've got the digital maturity that is required, you can then think about deploying a platform that enables you to code your own applications. But that, from my perspective, comes a bit afterwards, because if you acquire a platform, you're locking yourself probably a bit too early. You haven't really looked at the magnitude of what's possible. And on top of it, you're not going to directly be able to code yourself. Again, it is not that complex to code applications. The way we look at it is you need a well-rounded team of 5 to 10 people for 3 to 5 months. Had nothing to do with the deployment we used to see 20 years ago with armies of consultants deploying the likes of SAP and changing ERPs. And no, it's significantly lighter. But nevertheless, coming back to the framework I was outlining, start with a few applications and then potentially go down to the layer of the platform and start having discussions around the type of platform you want to deploy. Now, you've asked very specific questions about platform I would recommend in the utility sector. So I wouldn't recommend any platform, not here to sell software, no hardware. But again, my humble suggestion is, depending on the use case, SaaS is often super competitive. Select 1 to 2 to 3, start discussions with vendors, look into interoperability, and then progressively move to the platform layer, which is the layer underneath.
You mentioned actually that how you select the application, this is another story. And I believe you just scroll this question, but this is very important topic. How you select the application probably will be the game changer, right? So it can be something really changes the whole efficiency of the processes and the results. Actually, when you are talking about all the digitization and about the utilities, as it is end users, utility consumer, how this will affect me as a utility consumer? What do you think? How this digitization will be affected me? I'm back. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I think we lost him for a moment because I cannot see him in the list of participants.
I'm back.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay. I was checking myself, like, am I alone?
Yeah. So that actually is interesting.
Am I frozen or JeanPaul? So it's like...
I don't know what happened. I thought that the bandwidth in the UAE was amazing. We just proven that there is a room for improvement. Sorry for that. Continue, Lela.
No, actually, this is another evidence that when you plan, there is always something happens in the middle. So it's just to be aware and just to continue as we started. So how it will affect the end user? What do you think?
Wow. So I would imagine that you're referring to digital as a whole. Mm-hmm. First, let's tackle often what is the elephant in the room. People are potentially for the right reasons, are a bit afraid about digitalization in the sense that it's a job killer. Now, part of those fears are justified, but only part of that. I'll use an example. Sorry. Now it's been happening for a while, and digitalization has accelerated in multiple functions. In support functions, we talk a lot about RPA, that is optimizing how repetitive tasks are being done in a super easy way, and it's been going on for probably more than 5 to 10 years now. And we're moving into AI now, into a bit more advanced applications. Now, the way I look at it is, we've seen that over the different industrial revolutions, our civilization has gone through for the last few centuries. Jobs are constantly being replaced, and there's new jobs that are constantly being created. That's a matter of life. Resisting it is not a winning strategy at all. Now, people might want to, but it's not a winning strategy. Adapting to it is really, what I would assume a more plausible strategy. Now, in the case of digital, let's break this into tangible things. First, if there were jobs that were repetitive in nature, or even dangerous in some cases, that are being replaced by solutions that are more automated, in some cases robots, in some things, that's actually good news. I don't believe anybody is really happy in doing a very repetitive, and in between brackets, with all the respect I can put forward, dull job. It's not enriching. So that's never a bad news. Now, where we're seeing some tension is where digitalization is starting to tackle into more advanced jobs, white collar type of jobs. Take an example that has nothing to do with energy. Being a lawyer, being a doctor, diagnostics in medicine are increasingly done by AI. And when you're a lawyer, you need to research your case. It's increasingly being done. Watson, for example, IBM solution has revolutionized the way it's being done in Europe with 6-7 years ago. That's anecdotal examples. So it is happening. What is the implication? The implications are that at the same time, for example, there are new jobs being created. We talk about data science, we talk about application developers, citizen data scientists, and it's creating tremendous amount of job. Point one. Point two, we're a civilization, we're humans, and we can talk about higher level of purposes, but we've been evolving for the last few millennium, and nothing is really stopping this. And apologies, I'm always taking this to a higher level because I want to give purpose to I certainly want to give purpose to what things I do, but also I'd love people to connect to that. Progress is moving forward. It has moved forward. It's not stopping. We're confronted with significant challenges. We're seeing this, by the way. I don't know if you guys have followed the news, but the summer was pretty hot in lots of countries. And when it wasn't hot, you had fires and hurricanes and tornadoes, and it's been a mess. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. So, the climate is actively changing, and it's just going to be a challenge to deal with. So we've got lots of challenges. We absolutely need to continue innovating to address those challenges. Digitalization is enabling us to do more effectively. I've mentioned a 15 to 20% impact on energy consumption. But it's a reality. It is a reality. We can talk about how digital is impacting smart grids in utilities. Well, at the end of the day, it is improving the way we consume, and we absolutely need to do this if we want to elevate the level of life of the average population in the world. We just simply have to do this, and digital is a core dimension of this. So, bringing it back to the question you asked, how is it impacting jobs? Well, my only advice is get on the train, train yourself, and be part of that evolution. Don't fight it. It is a losing strategy. That's what I always say. I'm a living proof of that. our common friends can testify on this. I've started my career as an operational consultant, working with my hands, my brain, my calculator, and then 15, 20 years later, I'm helping companies acquire AI-based solutions, because that's the future, and if they want to remain competitive, that's the only way. And I'm also at the same time helping individuals acquire those skills. It's those are skills that can be acquired. There's nothing magical about it. That's it. Back to you, Lela.
Excellent. Thank you. Actually, I would like to remind the participants, feel free to post your questions, comments in the chat section. We will be addressing them later on. You mentioned the different layers of all this. One of the layers which I see is a sector coupling and integration. So what do you think? How can digitization facilitate sector coupling and sector integration? What are the existing use cases, if you have them, or if you can think of any?
So what is sector coupling? Let's again go back to definitions.
Yes.
And again, I don't want to pretend being an expert. You've asked the questions. I've never really worked directly into it. I've documented myself, and I'll provide a very simple definition. Sector coupling is acknowledging the fact that, especially in the case of utilities, the sector has evolved a lot. So, from probably 20 years ago, one production plant, a set of distribution lines, and a set of consumers that are to a certain extent static with peak demand that could be modelized in a fairly simple way. That's like 20 years ago. Now you've got much more complexity because the sources of production have varied a lot with renewables. Just a few words on renewables. And I was looking into this, it blew my mind because I had no idea. Did you know that renewables over the last 10 years went from being generating 20% of the electricity we consume in the world to 30%. We've moved from 20% to 30% in less than 10 years, and it's accelerating. So it's safe to expect that it's probably going to be 50% in the next 10 years. I don't know, but it's accelerating at a tremendous pace. Now, often renewables are distributed. Often, not always, but often. Now, distributing power generation in a grid drives tremendous complexity. Without getting into the specifics of how a smart grid works, and just intuitively, people have to imagine, how it was complex 20 years ago and how crazily complex it has become nowadays. Nevertheless, with those intelligent solutions at multiple levels, we're really able to manage this in an effective way. And we've addressed this piece by piece. Innovation is changing the way electricity is being generated day after day. I'll give a basic example. I was referring to Lebanon in my introduction discussion with you. And obviously, we're going through a violent energy crisis in Lebanon. Yeah, there's simply no fuel, no electricity. My parents live with 1 hour of electricity a day now, per day in Beirut. 2 years ago, there were
our hearts, JeanPaul. So we had exactly the same problem for a few years as well. So I really feel your pain and what you're saying.
It can be. But think about it. People were they moved from having electricity 24 hours a day 3 years ago to 1 hour now. And what's the impact? The impact is people have suddenly woke up and have realized that there is an alternative. You can actually put a few solar panels on your roof and solve part of the problem. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's going to solve part of the problem. Now, unfortunately, in the case of Lebanon, it's being done in a chaotic way, but let's put this aside. What is the impact? Well, people are starting to own part of the problem and coming up with their own solutions. Now, coming back to the big question, that is adding complexity into the network, and ultimately to be done in a harmonious way that is optimized for all the participants, we'll need digital solutions. Back to you.
Yeah, I'm amazing. And actually, this speed is for everything. Speed of acquiring these technologies continues. And actually, the question which I had that, again, for organizations, there should be, and for governments, actually, there should be some trade-off, because there are big infrastructure already invested, lots of capital and funding and financing is invested. And now with new digitization, it somehow should be made either compatible or work together. talking about, I see among the participants, those who are in a decision making in the government sector. What do you think? How government can support? What are the legal bases of this, and how this digitization in energy sector can be dealt with and supported by the government?
It's a very vague, it's a very large question. So the role of government in accelerating digitalization in their own economy. So I'll take the example of the country I live in, the UAE, which has done huge progress over the last probably 5 to 10 years in digitalization. Now, let's start with the vision. Probably it is digitalizing, the state, the different components of the state, and ultimately the economy is a priority from the leadership and the state. And they've taken that super seriously and have set up the right governance around it, ensuring that things are done in an orderly manner and coordinated manner with the right level of investments at the right level. Mm-hmm. Perfect. It is producing impact. I was reading about it also. There's a smart government initiative at the OECD with different pillars, from health to police to justice to, and it's being actively deployed. If I were to compare and contrast how I'm dealing with my own state initially and how I'm dealing with the UAE state over here, things are digital here. It's like and it has happened over the last 3 to 4 years. It's pretty impressive. Now, what's the impact? The impact is that it's more fluid, it's more effective. I don't waste hours and hours, queuing and waiting for things. No, it's done in a fairly seamless way. Now, and that has taken half a decade and was done because of the right governance. I don't think it is achievable with the vast majorities of countries globally. It doesn't require magic nor tremendous investments. Just like every project, the right governance, the right pace, and being able to do this in an orderly manner. Now, coming to the second aspect of the question you asked, which is how can a government help the private sector, the different industries, to follow the pace? Well, I'll relate back to what I've initially said, which is just first of all, show the way, lead by example. Digitalize the state. And then the second thing that I think is super important is create the ecosystem around that makes corporation do this in an orderly manner. So what is that ecosystem? Well, first, without getting into the details, I don't really see a proper digitalization happening in an industrial company without a reflection on the infrastructure. And again, like I said previously, if you were to do this on premise, it's just not going to be economically viable. So, something that a state needs to be looking into is the policy when it comes to deploying cloud within their own economy. Obviously, cloud is accessible, but there's all kind of data sovereignty consideration that need to be looked into, and standardization. Ultimately, if you want to be competitive, you need to make sure that you've got a certain form of control on the standards that are being used, and that often is enforced at a state level. Now, depending which state you're referring to, you might want to actually replicate some of the standards that have been defined either by the US, China, the European Union, and not recreate everything. But you certainly want to have control on some of the critical data that your economy is producing, because it is a competitive advantage. The other thing that is important is equipping those corporations with the right skill set. Now, the role of a state often is intervenes in education. So it goes back to the STEM type of education you want to provide from your pupils, students, to your universities. At the end of the day, digital transformation is also a scientific exercise and needs mathematics, science, computing skills. And you just need to make sure that your workforce is properly equipped with. There are there's different ways for a central authority, a state, to incentivize and to put this in motion in its critical industries. But that I think is paramount. Did I forget anything? From my perspective, these are the essential things. And at the end of the day, you're creating that ecosystem that makes it, a more competitive environment to operate in, and you'll be able to even attract talent from competing industries and nations.
Actually, the subject itself is pretty big, and it cannot be really covered in 45 minutes, and I don't have ambition for that. We are just tackling the basics and talking about the world trends, and probably right now we have already passed 45 minutes, and time to go to the questions, I guess. Oh, we have questions coming and comments. Different questions. Let's see. We have good facts from George. George, thank you for the data and the links. Okay. We have questions from Zanda Ervarte. I can understand digitization of wind and water generated energy, electricity and power, but gas and oil is a mystery to me. Would like to hear your thoughts of how to digitize this in future years. Any theories? And obviously, would it affect us as humans and our planets, exchanging our current environment, forest, ocean, and etc.? Thank you for the question, Zandra.
Not sure I properly captured everything.
Question, and I guess.
Is it the role of digital in renewables? Is that the question about?
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Most likely. So
apologies if I missed.
How digitization will affect all the. So how it will affect the digitization, if I read it correctly.
So I've mentioned that in electricity generation, renewables went from roughly 20% to 30% less than 10 years, and the growth rates are tremendous at the moment. Part of that, I would say a big chunk of that is obviously due to innovation, and part of that innovation is technology driven. I've mentioned the fact that those networks, energy is pretty much always about optimizing networks, distribution networks are increasingly complex, and that complexity is being increasingly managed by digital solutions. So do I believe that this is going to accelerate? Definitely yes. For two reasons: because we can, and because we need, and we can debate both. We can because guess what? Those once you open the genie's out of the box, he's out of the box, and you're not going to put it back in the box. Now that we know that we can optimize things with applications, we just will. And the second reason, which is as important, is because we absolutely need to reduce our dependency on oil. And if we don't do this, there's simply not going to be a world for our kids to live in. We're witnessing it year after year. The IEA, by the way, when was that? I think a year ago, outlined their scenario from 2020 till 2050. They believe that the oil consumption in the world is going to go from roughly 95 million barrels per day to 25 million barrels per day. So looking at history, we've never done an energy transition so quickly. It took roughly 150 years to move from discovering oil to it being representing I think 50% of the energy consumption in the world. Before that, it was coal. But just moving from the current energy mix to what they are describing in 30 years is something we've never done. Now, they believe it's doable, and there are the references. Chances are that it will happen. They have a history of underestimating the growth in renewables. It's kind of like almost a joke because they always put projection and then increase them by 30% 6 months later, and So they've done repeatedly this with renewables. Now they've made that bold statement. Chances are that it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, we'll have to deal with the consequences. And they're not going to be.
We will talk about this later. We have another question. Thank you, JeanPaul. Actually, the question from George: is there any master plan, step by step, in the area of energy digitization? So, is there any step-by-step plan? Probably, I don't know, in the organization, in the government level, in the sector level. How you see it?
So, I think I'm going to put forward three things. First, even if there was a plan, there's no magic recipe. So that plan is going to be generic to a certain extent, and you always have to adapt it to context. That's 20 years of consulting that are speaking here. The second thing I'm going to put forward is I've read some amazing books over the last 2 years. I can put forward a few that have, outline approaches that work. One of the books that I like a lot, and that's the book that I recommended to our mutual friend, is Digitalization. And it's a book written by Tom Siebel 2 years ago. And if you look at one of the chapters is definitely a step-by-step plan for leadership teams to embark on a digital transformation. 20 pages on that with lots of return on experience. The last thing I'm going to put forward is look at success stories, digital transformation. There's all kinds of corporate transformation that are being synthesized and made available to the general public in books. One of the things I do a lot is reading, because first of all, I believe that it's the most effective way to acquire knowledge. And I filter the books I don't have time to read. So I just get people to recommend me books and just scan them quickly. And if I like them, I read them in details. Just so do this. If you're about to embark into a digital journey in your organization, spend 2 hours a day, even if you don't have them, find them, to just document yourself on that. Look at things that have worked with others and things that haven't, and then build on this and make your own plan, is my recommendation, Lela.
I see. Thank you. We have a question from Inga. From your experience, which of the governments are farther progressed with the energy digitalization?
Governments. Well, let's take that by block. And I'm less familiar with China. China is doing amazing stuff, but it's I'm less documented. In Europe, for example, which is ultimately my continent, there's been a lot of integrated plans developed over the last few years that are extremely ambitious. And if we come back to energy, the European energy grid is probably the most integrated, the most sophisticated, the smarter grid you can find around. And it hasn't started yesterday. It's been going on for a few decades now, but it's probably the most effective one, i.e. the cost of electricity is for the consumer probably lower than anywhere else in the world, which has all kinds of positive impacts on inhabitants. And that has happened because of those integrated plans being rolled out progressively. The US has done things in the same way. I've discovered recently, for example, talking about smart initiatives in utilities. The US launched in 2012, so almost a decade ago, an initiative called, I think it's called Green Button. And they were able to embark, I think, 180 utilities companies in the US. And it's as simple as when you install the green button, a consumer will basically accept to share his a consumer equipped with smart meters, his consumption data that are protected, privacy, all kind of privacy conversation are taken into account. And basically 60 million consumers in the US have applied for this for the last decade. And that is generating intelligence, i.e. utility companies, those different companies have a much better granular understanding of consumption and are therefore able to forecast in a much more granular way consumption. Guess what? When you do this, electricity, storing electricity comes with a cost. So you have to almost always produce as much as you consume, putting aside the storage. So if you're able to forecast with a significantly higher level of accuracy, ultimately it's good. It's good because you produce what you need. The unit cost of production goes down, and it's better for the planet also. How was that done? Well, it took a decade and lots of data, 60 million consumers data to come up with those fairly advanced prediction models. Is that being done elsewhere in the world? Well, it has to a certain extent. It's just the fact that it's working there is demonstrating to the rest of the world that it has value, but it requires coordination. We've talked a lot about the role of states in putting this in motion in the right way for the ecosystem to play the game.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much. We have the next question from Gia. What about smart city power management? Any thoughts?
I love the term smart city because it means a lot and nothing at the same time. And in the region, especially, it's been misused and overused. Well, what is a smart city? Let's demystify it. It's most of the technologies I talked about are what defines a smart city. A smart city is a city in which all of the core processes, from energy generation, production, consumption, to transport, to lodging, are done in a smart way. Now, to be able to do this on a smart way, you need to have sensors pretty much everywhere, and you need to be able to adjust the way of living, to optimize the way of living. Let's put it like this. Now, is that a dream? No, it's happening in lots of cities in the world at different scale, at different level. And again, essentially through the smart adoption of digital solutions, It's not about throwing all the latest gadgets in one package. It doesn't work. But doing this the smart way, in a progressive way, embarking the inhabitants, the consumers. We haven't talked about it, just ensuring trust also. Digital has a huge problem. We haven't talked about it, and that's a topic in itself, probably that is more than an hour. There's a trust problem because when you start sharing your data, you're always skeptical. We've all heard about so that also needs to be done in a very careful way because you wanna avoid too much resistance. That's it. I'll stop here. Sorry, I'm throwing lots of ideas, probably not in a super orderly way, but it's.
We have 2 more questions left, and actually we want to somehow fit into the timetable. Arun, the next question is from embarking to maturity. How do we set a realistic board expectations for digital transformation in terms of time frame and resources?
Wow. Well, depending where you start from, obviously. The elements I'm going to put forward are the following. Deploying a smart application, data-driven application that is a mix of a bit of AI and physics-based algorithm is a matter of months, not years. So a few months. The important element to take into account is, because that takes time from more often than what we think, is just making sure that there is alignment within the organization on, is that a journey we want to embark on? Do we have the budget? Do we know how we're going to go about it? Where we're going to start? How is it going to create value? If all of this is fairly well packaged, putting it in motion is much easier, and it's it's a never-ending journey. So there's no ending at the end of the day. But I guess what we need to take into account is when will it start actually generating value. And my wild guess would be, depending on the maturity, a few months. No, you don't need years to see results. And guess what? You'll have that magical element, because when you start seeing results, that often reinforces the belief and the credibility, and accelerates. The wheel starts spinning much quicker after that. So so in a nutshell, a few months to get a few results initially, and then things accelerate.
Thank you, JeanPaul. And last question for today's session is from Karim. Where do you think SME should start its digital transformation road from? Should it start by looking at its business model, or start from the bottom up and check with process with add value and less complex, as you stated, JP?
The latter, but Karim has mentioned SME, so I would imagine that it's, he's referring to more an individual approach than an organizational approach, unless I misunderstood the question. And if that's the case, the element I put forward is the following. First, you need to equip yourself with some basic skills. I've mentioned a few things, and again, I'm happy to answer questions if people were to ping me on LinkedIn. There's all kind of courses, books that I've read that helped me a lot.
Actually, we can put those books that you recommended on our chat on the LinkedIn for this event. Yeah. Perfect.
Let's do that. So to come back to Karim's question, step number one is acquire those skills. Step number two is you need credibility to initiate a transformation in an organization, and credibility and momentum. So taking into account the matrix I've mentioned earlier, select one use case that you believe you can tackle, and yet again is going to create value, and then go after it. For a use case to be addressable, there needs to be data. Do you have data? And then you start with something fairly simple. You don't need fancy applications. You can often program things with a bit of Python, and so it is doable for someone that wants. It's not going to be optimized, but it's doable. And then showcase that it works. And then guess what? This is when you start having credibility and can unlock things to operate and scale up things later on. But that's especially if you're starting from scratch, that's the journey I would outline for things to move forward.
Amazing. Wow. And we are over an hour. Time flies, and it was very interesting. And actually, as was mentioned by Kiaran, this lots of thoughts and lots of ideas, and lots needs to be digested. I'm really thankful to you. I'm really thankful for the audience, for your participation, for your involvement, your questions. And we will be sending the feedback questionnaire to those who attended to get your opinion, how you envision what are the topics probably for future digital transformation talks. And I would like to suggest to follow me on the LinkedIn or other social medias. We are posting different events that may be interesting for you. And for one of the talks, you may even be a speaker with the interesting topics. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a nice and lovely rest of the day wherever you are all over the world. Thank you, JeanPaul.
Thank you, Lela.
It was a pleasure, and it was an honor.